Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Portico Library. My name is Ivan Wadeson. I'm the Executive Director of Manchester City of Literature. Manchester City of Literature is the charity that's been set up to manage the city's UNESCO designation on behalf of Manchester City Council, University of Manchester and Manchester Metropolitan University, and a partnership network of over 30 organisations, independent publishers, writing agencies, cultural venues like Elizabeth Gaskell House and the International Anthony Burgess Foundation, and of course libraries. Tonight's event is part of the Festival of Libraries, which is a Greater Manchester-wide celebration over 5 days of libraries, of the buildings, the impact they have on the place, the impact they have on people. We want to use people's stories to talk about libraries. So the people who run libraries, the people who use them, and we've brought a lot of artists and creatives into library settings to work with community groups, to tell their own stories, to create their own work. And we have a series of talks called Inspired by Libraries, of which this is one of those talks. If you are on social media, use the hashtag Festival of Libraries, and you can find out about the rest of the programme events for going on up until Sunday on manchestercityofliterature.com. And a lot of the filmed events will sit on there for a long time. Some will disappear after this weekend, but most will still be there. So tonight's event, I'm delighted to welcome Mike Garry and Shirley May. We've got two of the city's finest poets in one of the finest libraries. As you can see, I brought my collections of some of your works here. And I'm sure you already know this, but to make this event even more special and pertinent to our theme, both Mike and Shirley were librarians. So tonight's event is almost a perfect synthesis of what we're trying to achieve with the Festival of Libraries. So I'm going to hand over now to Mike and Shirley. I hope you enjoy this evening.
Well, thank you, Ivan. I'm going to say thank you to Ivan.
Thank you, Ivan. A wonderful, brilliant introduction. If it wasn't for the likes of Ivan, we'd have to sit here and do it all ourselves. So thank you, Ivan, and thank you,
UNESCO
the people who've organised about it. Are we going to start by reading? Are you going to start by reading a poem?
No, we're going to start by talking about why I love libraries.
Oh, right.
Because that's how awkward I am.
Right, great.
So, we were asked, Mike and I, and I'm going to do this. I just wanted to come all blinged up with my hat on.
Shirley Bassett, you said.
This is my new signature, but I'm going to do this because I've got a really good new haircut and it's got little marks in my hair. And I'm going to do this because I'm extra. But I just wanted to strip on stage, really.
Again?
Again. So, why do I love libraries? I had a teacher called Mrs. Doody. So Mrs. Doody would have carpet time, and if you're a parent, you'll know what carpet time is. It's the time when you sit on the carpet after you've worked all day to learn how to read and write, and you'd have a story told to you. And she told me the story of Alice in Wonderland. And then she used to take us on trips to the library, and I just absolutely loved listening to her stories. And when I moved to Withington was very much a white middle-class area. But my dad was one of these men that was quite defiant, and he was like, I'm going to live where I want. And although we lived in Moss Side for a time, when I was about 6, he bought a house in Withington. And it was not pleasant when I went to Old Moat. For about 6 weeks, I was called Sambo.
How many other black kids in your class?
Wait, Nignog. Wait a minute. Everything. There was this program on called Love Thy Neighbour, and it was just really, really bad. But the actual neighbours loved each other in a weird sort of just calling each other names. And so it was on TV at the time. We watched it. We loved it because black people were on telly and they just weren't on telly. And there was this,
And they were always the triumphant ones in the programme as well.
Yeah, most of the time, absolutely. But I went to the school and that's what I was called a lot. But within 6 weeks, this boy called Peter, somebody another, I can't remember his name, he looked a bit like Donny Osmond. And all of a sudden I was forgotten because we were all chasing him around this.
Right. Another distraction.
Yeah, a bit of a distraction. Anyway, I digress because I'm talking about why I love libraries. But it all kind of ties in with moving to an area that was not very friendly at the time. I know that I transitioned somewhere. I don't know when I became Shirley, but I did, and it was quick, and it was soon, and I was just Shirley. And maybe Mrs. Doody, I don't remember, was a part of it because she told lots of stories. So she did, Uncle Tom's Cabin. She would just do all of these wonderful stories that would take you on a fantasy journey. And she introduced me to the library, and the library in Withington also told stories.
Brilliant library.
So it had a story time. And I was that kid that loved going to the library. In fact, I have a broken tooth at the front of my mouth trying to get to story time, and a car was coming out. I didn't see it, and I went straight over my handlebar, didn't press my brakes, hit this car, saw my tooth run down, still moved my bike into the library and went to story time, then went home and told my mum I got knocked over. But yeah, it was really weird. I love libraries. And then, of course, I meet Mike how many years, Mike?
Too many
About
bloody
30 years ago, I think we met. We're old now. We were young and blonde when we met. Both of us.
So that's the root of your love for libraries,
Yeah.
Mrs. Doody.
Mrs. Doody in story time.
So mine was, we were Irish immigrant parents. You can play out as long as you want. So we were playing out in the 6, 7, playing out, and it's quite weird actually because we were playing with a rugby ball that I'd never seen before in my life. But someone kicked this rugby ball on the roof. And it's not like today. Balls were precious things back in the day. And it was, you can't just lose a ball. It's sort of like a crime almost. So someone had to go to this official-like building that reminded me of a probation office or something like that. And we went in this building. I went in this building because I was the youngest, and it was one of those. And I was like, and that was the first time I ever went into a library. And as a kid, people aren't really nice to you on the whole. That's what I experienced growing up in 70s Manchester. Most people hate you. Most people find you a pain in the arse or as if you're going to rob something. But this was different. They treated me in a completely different way. She was kind, the woman who came to me, and she was welcoming. Those simple principles of life which triumphed with me. She was kind, she was welcoming, and I went in the library and she spoke to me about what a library does, and all the way through it I was like, nah, this can't be right. You can't be giving stuff out free here. They can't allow you to just take books. I wasn't from a trusting world, and it was all based upon a trust. And I then went on to get the little thing, brought it home to my mum and dad. They signed it. I went back, and then that was
The little yellow card.
the little yellow cards. But it was just an entry into a world I'd never seen before. And I would literally go after school and sit there with picture books and just big books. It was all about big books at first, with pictures and just being surrounded in this imagery and seeing people being nice and seeing people coming in. And it just felt like my kind of place, even as a young kid. It felt like the sort of place I wanted to be. I felt safe. I felt comfortable in.
That's one of the things that I think that I felt the most was the safety in the space. And I can be a chatter, as you know. But it was one of the places that you had to be quiet, because it was back in the day, it was, shh, this is the library. And it's really quite, I like the quiet, and I like the safety that a library can sometimes give to you. Yeah, more than anything, it's the safety. And guess what?
Books. It was an access to a book that wasn't a Bible or rebel songs but it was access to books, and we didn't have access to books. We had access to certain kinds of books, but just the immense open range. It fundamentally shaped my life because it meant that I did serendipitously just pick up stuff and take it home, and and devour lots of it. And I wasn't a great reader, don't get me wrong. It wasn't about this novel or whatever. It was just the book and the pictures and the words and the whole idea of that, and the trust and the space and the warmth. We grow up in trauma in lots of ways. I was once called, going off the subject here, but I was once called, I do a lot in kids' homes, and I was once called at this kids' home because I was the only person who could get this kid to school. And they called me up one day, and I'm going off the point here, but it's interesting. And the kid said to me, "Nah, I'm in a gang, Fallowfield Mad Dogs."
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, "Are you taking the piss? Is that a name of a gang? Oh, Bad Boys and all that?"
Yeah.
So this kid ended up shooting someone in his gang. If he'd have got a library, if he'd have had some space in a library, as young men around that age, we are so open to inspiration or empowerment. And I say it all the time, those guys who get the kids in the army with their caravans in Moston, car parks, and not being funny about, but if you had a library caravan next to that, it would be an element of choice. It's just based upon what's there. These people don't choose these things. I'm not separating myself from them, but as a young, we just follow our nose, and there's not a lot of confidence and stuff like that. But what libraries did for me was stop me going into that caravan, or stop me going into places that I shouldn't go into.
I mean, we've both worked in really tough areas. You've worked at, the library in Longsight.
So what's really interesting, I'm interrupting you there, sorry, but what's really interesting is our relationship in terms of libraries. So this is how it worked. I studied librarianship. I studied librarianship for no other reason more than my missus was pregnant. She said to me, "You're getting a job." And I'd never had a proper job. I wasn't working for the Thatcherite regime. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't contributing to Persia, to missiles and stuff. But she said, "You've got to get a job." So I spent loads of time in libraries already. So I thought, well, where do you want to work? Where you spend your time. So I got a job in libraries, and within 3 weeks, I remember going to but you've got to understand, I've come out of a world of independence, and then I had middle-aged librarian women curling the finger at me and telling me to go and do some photocopying. It was really difficult for me to deal with at first because I was so independent. I remember going upstairs to the personnel, and Moira, I'll never forget her, Moira, get me out. For God's sake, she said, "Have you thought about doing the course?" I said, "You're taking the piss, aren't you?" And she goes, "No, there's a course. You can do a librarian degree." I said, "You're joking." So she gave me Keith Lund's name, and I went down and met this guy, and he convinced me into doing this course. The greatest thing I've ever done in my life, on the cusp of the internet. I was on the internet when you used to have to get a phone and ram it in a socket like that. It cost you 40 quid, and what came down was 3 letters, a Dewey Decimal Classification number. But we were on the internet. And then I saw the internet happening, slowly opening up before my eyes as a librarian student. Finished my course.
But I'm going to take him off his course and say the libraries that you've worked in have not been easy libraries.
Because I chose that, because when I finished my course, before I hate professionalisation. I hate it. Because before I did my course, right, I'd go, "Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Why don't we do this?" And there's a snobbery to it. When I got my course, they came up to me and went, "Mike, what do you want to do?" It was like I had to pass a certain thing whereby they felt as if my opinions were valid, which really upset me in lots of ways. But what they said was, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to set up homework clubs for kids.
Right.
I want a space for kids to go in where the adults aren't moaning at them." And I don't blame them for moaning at them, but I want them in a space on their own whereby they don't get moaned at because they're in a space on their own. And I set up these, they gave us loads of money. And I set up this one homework centre in Longsight Library that smashed it. It absolutely smashed it. We had 500 kids a night and things like that. And I turned them into poetry centres. Because whatever I do in life, I make it about what I like. That's how it works. So I had this...
So he started Longsight. And this is where I come in.
No, it's good.
Because I'll never shut him off if I don't jump in.
Go on.
So he started Longsight and then started to get well famous as a poet. And eventually you kind of move out from Longsight and a whole city. So he was the forerunner for something that I became a part of, and I became the Central West manager for the district that was called Central West. So Longsight, Moss Side, Cholton.
Moss Side Powerhouse, kids being shot outside,
and
your students being killed.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was the environment we worked in. Now let's
also, we save children. Mike's right, you know, if you give people choices, and I was in the heart of Powerhouse Library, and there's a young man that called me about 3 years ago, and he said to me, I just wanted to meet you and buy you a coffee. And I said, it'd be lovely to meet. I'd seen his stuff going on Instagram, and I just remember a few years before, there was a guy called Mike Dixon that used to work for libraries, and a child had been shot, and some photographs had been taken, and these young lads wanted the photographs because it was the only photographs they had of this child, this young lad that had been killed, and it was their friend. And Mike didn't know where the photos were because he was an interim lead taking over. And he came out to find his car completely smashed to death. And there's just this one image of this young man just across the road with his arms folded, didn't touch anything on that car. There was like these little ones that had been, I don't know, ordered to go and destroy this car. I met him 3 years on. He's now the head of a service. He did a degree. He was sneaking books out of the library. We were giving him W.D. Du Bois. We were giving him, he was just taking out the most books, but actually not acting like he was tough and he was hard and that he didn't want to be involved. And I can remember, you know, Mike, who was also defiant, came back the next day with his car. It was all plummeted and broken, but all the windows and he was a mechanic, and all the windows and all the doors, it was all put back together, but the car was dented and broken. He drove it for the rest of the time while he worked there as an example that you can break this, but actually we're going to actually still help you. And when I was asked to go for coffee, this guy had met Neil Armstrong in a train station, and Neil bought him a jacket and brought him along to something. Completely changed his life, but it was not just Neil doing that. He said it was the library and the books and the constant. And I remember actually buying books in that he would request, you know, because you can do that as a librarian. If somebody asks you for a book, you get it, and you make sure that they get it. And when I worked in Moss Side, I wasn't even bothered if they were stealing the books as long as they were taking them. Do you know what I mean?
Just think, you can walk into any library in the world and you can receive any document in the world in that library. People don't know that. People don't know that you can do a thing called interlibrary loans, whereby they will find whatever you want and they will bring it there. It's like the internet, but real.
Yeah.
And I'm not being funny now, but I do it regular, whereby my kids are looking for something, and my missus is looking for something, and I do say, I'll run to the library.
Because it's going to be there.
So
or somebody will get it for you.
While I was running Longsight and all this, so I had my kids on my own. And on Saturday mornings, they used to have to bring them to work with me. And I'd have a chit list. And what it was them going to the library catalogues, because it was card index then, 97, 98.
Do you remember them, anyone?
Card index, and they'd have a sheet, and Connor and Maria would sort of like work through the sheet and find Dewey Decimal, or I'd give them different classification systems, and they'd get quizzes, and I'd do that, just leave them on their own in the library, and I'd speak to Mary on the desk and say, just keep your eye on the kids and that. My daughter's a lawyer now. The basis of law is librarianship. Basically, it's the hunting and searching of information. What I was doing then was pre-internet, well, on the cusp almost, was teaching them how to find information, and that's what we do with our kids. That's what we did with our kids. The most important thing was the speed of access. Speed of access for information. That mixed up with, so I had lots of groups of Asian kids who were automatically homophobic because of the way they'd been brought up, just because of the way they'd been brought up, and they genuinely believed that a Muslim person could not be gay. So I worked really hard with these kids, and it took ages and stuff like that, and slowly but surely they come round, because at first it's like, no, don't be stupid. But slowly but surely they come round and they start to trust you and they start believing. And I remember sitting down with them with a Guardian article about an Asian kid who used to drive 200 miles to a gay club in Texas. And that kid was left murdered on a barbed wire fence somewhere. Horrible, horrible stuff. I sat down with this group of 8 macho lads, and we sat there and read it, and I watched one by one. I watched their lives. I watched their perspective, their views on life change within 3 or 4 weeks. This is what libraries do. This is what libraries can do. This is what libraries can do. Our young people are desperate for a sign, a light to say, come this way or go that way. And at the moment, the lights that are shining so bright are the wrong lights. They're the lights which are leading them down the wrong way of bling. And the worst thing about libraries is the word.
Why?
Because it sounds terrible. It immediately carries, and so imagine me as a younger man in a club, maybe, yeah. I'm a poet and a librarian. And they walk off. They immediately walk off. The whole image. That's what I talk about, image of libraries. I don't know why. That's what I talk about, image of libraries. In America, there's a whole marketing thing that goes on with libraries, whereby Woody Allen's on a poster, whereby leading celebrities, for want of a better word, are promoting libraries. Now, at the moment, our library service is amazing, absolutely amazing. But we need to be postering walls, and we need to be talking about how amazing it is. But I don't think libraries can do that. I don't think the libraries have the ability to do the marketing that it requires to get libraries where they should be. Because as an institution...
to some extent, I agree with you and I disagree with you, because if you go to somewhere like Longsight, it's probably gets the most footfall. It has the most people using it, both for things like, information, getting your passport verified, going in, there's education at the Stockport one. There's lots going on. That's got the most footfall. Outside the Central Library. And I've been into Central Library since they refurbished it. It's absolutely a draw. I've been in when it's exam times, and you just see kids in study groups in rows, actually working in the library. And why is that? That they are still coming, but I do think that it still has the issue of sometimes the counter staff are just not trained right. To be more welcoming and to say, actually, this is a space for you. There are some libraries that are like that and some libraries that are not. So, and I don't necessarily think that you need celebrity endorsement to actually pick up a book. I think it's about how the people who are greeting you when you come through the door make you feel welcome. But I think that for those who do use those spaces, they are spaces where people can learn, can grow, can meet people and fall in love in the library. All sorts happens in the library, and we'll shut up from there. And but yeah, I think that it's not just. I really don't believe that a celebrity endorsement is what you need. I think it's about making access and making people feel as though they're welcome to a space. You can walk into a space and immediately feel like, oh, this isn't for me, because the reception's not right. And I think it's about how you train those people to be most welcoming. And libraries do have a bad press. It has been snobby in the past, but I think that they have done a lot to erode that. In my time, anyway, in the time that I was working for libraries, we did a lot to change that. We didn't have. Libraries, you have to wear a certain type of clothes. When you went to Longsight or powerhouse, you could wear jeans and you could wear your T-shirts and stuff like that because you knew you were working with young people. But there was a corporate look that you had to have if you were working somewhere else. But a lot of that has been eroded away, and I think that they have become more places where things are happening. You know, music is happening now, dance is happening. I think last year there was a whole, before the pandemic actually, we've missed a year. What would it be? 2019. There were, you know, they had bands going on in libraries, you know, dance, all sorts. So I think they are changing spaces that art and craft and culture are intermixing and blending. And, you know, we're using the books that are there also to tell the story. So I think it has changed since me and you sort of left, you know, and it's getting better. But I still think it has, I do believe, like yourself, it has a place to go. I don't know whether or not I want, I don't know, Will Smith to tell me to go and read a book, do you know, or, you know, I don't know, some footballer telling me to read a book. No,
I totally disagree. I'm going to have a fight here. No, I totally disagree.
Right.
If you've got Marcus Rashford...
Well, that's different. He's cool, isn't he? Do you know what I mean?
This is what I'm talking about. If you've got Marcus Rashford saying reading is cool, it is the greatest advertising thing in the world. The people who need libraries in lots of ways, I think, in my own, is the young people. We must get them young. We must create environments whereby they can come in and...
See, I'm going to go again with the, you know, libraries have put on all kinds of stuff during summer where the young people can take books out and win prizes and do all. I know that there's stuff to do, but there's stuff to do everywhere.
It's the fundamentally shaping that Manchester does so well because they've got that concept of fuck it if it doesn't work. Do you know, let's just do it and let's just have a go. We know that our spirits are good and honest and all the things they should be. So let's just do what we do and let's see what happens.
Now the library's bigger and it's huge and it's massive, and I love Central Library.
I love Central Library.
It's an iconic building with so much wonderful things going on in there. And like I said, for me, it's the roaming around and seeing, you know, the new music section where you can play the piano with your your headphones on, and you go down into another bit of it, and there's a whole IT suite with. I'm not advertising for libraries. It sounds like I'm advertising libraries. Do you know, it's got its faults, and, you know, the faults sometimes lie with the management team, but, you know, if they don't resign and they don't move over for new people, what? I'm going to read a poem.
I must say, I think Neil McInnes is doing some really groundbreaking stuff. Just dead quick. I worked with a kid in libraries. I just think this might be interesting. So I worked with a kid in libraries, and there was this little thing going on all the time. They used to go wild swimming. He was my boss. He was called Neil Jordan. I loved him. No matter what I did, and we worked really well, and we were mates, but he was my boss. No matter what I did, I'd always be 5 minutes late. I couldn't get my head around it, and I was putting him in a real shit situation because he was my boss and he was my mate. But I was 5 minutes late every time, and everyone else would see it. But Neil was dead cool, and he had this little thing going on in libraries, and they'd go wild swimming. This group of people in libraries, and they'd go, "Have you tried such a thing? And have you tried such a thing?" And it was this really tough one that no one ever tried. And one weekend, Neil tried it. And he didn't come back, man. He didn't come back. He died in the water, in this space. The reason why I say this is within libraries there are worlds like your workplaces, and things go on in these worlds, and lives interconnect and interact, and I'd never worked before. I didn't understand the working world, and I just wanted to commemorate Neil Jordan today. I told you the story because it's an interesting story. All right, it might be a bit of a downer, but at the same time, real people are in these buildings, you know what I mean? Leaving 6-year-old kids, and the key to libraries, the most important thing for libraries for me is the staff. The staff are beautiful. They are so beautiful in so many ways, and the wisdom and knowledge that they all carry. Because if you talk to them individually, they've got PhDs and they've done this, but they choose to go into libraries because they believe that they want to promote the art of reading. And what can be more beautiful than promoting the art of reading? Sorry, Shirley.
I was just going to say, in a quiet life and a quiet experience, because libraries can be a place where you can contemplate who you are and what changes that you want to make. And I remember, you talk about PhD. There was one woman who just dedicated. She only worked part-time, and she lived a very frugal life. She was a beautiful woman, really giving woman, only worked, a short space of time because she did other work in the community, could afford to do that. Not everybody can. But what she gave to those young people was a listening ear. She listened to, somebody would say, oh, I want to do this. And 2 weeks later, she'd come in and she'd buy a board game from the second-hand shop, and she'd play a board game with the kids that, because computers and stuff like that were just taking over and stuff like that. But anyway, we're going to read as well. As Ivan said, I've got a book, and it's called She Wrote Her Own Eulogy, and it came out in 2018. I was supposed to take it on tour that year. Was it that year we've just had? Because when it first came out in October 2018, and I just moved from one job to set up something that's called Young Identity, and I couldn't move for the work that was involved trying to get the funding in place and things like that. And so I thought, I'll take it on tour. And then we were locked down by March, so I only did one reading, and I did the Central Library reading in October of 2018, and then 2019 I did. When did the lockdown happen? 2020, so 2019. Yeah.
And it weird how time's.
Sorry, time has just been broken in my head.
It's entered a new vacuum.
I did the Tate, and then we had a lockdown, and then so I've not been able to take this on tour. I'm going to read a poem that's called The Man Who Had No Sentences Left in Him. This man stopped my father from beating me once. I loved him until his final breath. The story goes that a woman destroyed him. By the time I knew him, he had no sentences left in him. I was only 5 when he came. My eyes were full of his sighs, the dirt and the decay that fused to him. The smell of him made me gasp. Water, my mother called, so softly called. She said, put your feet in here, soak them and wash them. Let your feet once again feel free. His eyes filled with tears at the pain and the kindness he found there. As Mother Bee bent down to wash his feet, she peeled away at his socks, and his flesh mingled there, his blood shed. I saw the anger rise within her. Why, the question came. Who had caused this decay and pain to so tall a black, handsome man on God's good day? Memory lingers on a friend, the man who had no sentences left in him. His silence was his own. No one could reach to the pain concealed there. Mama said some questions had no answers. Some things needed to be left alone. And as a child, I loved him. And as a teenager, I wanted to bring him back to those who cared. Had I known his time was short, I would have tried harder. He never revealed who had caused his hurt. At his funeral, I imagined I heard the soil that fell sing a song. And that is to a friend of mine called Barry. His real name, we only knew him as Barry. And my father found him in Monton Street, gambling house in Moss Side. And he had nowhere to go, and they were knocking down Moss Side. This is why we moved to Withington, because they were knocking it all down and going to replace it with the bull rings. And he had nowhere to go, and my dad just brought him home, and he stayed with us until he died. And his name was Edgar Oliver Ramsey, and we did not find his family until he died. And we don't know how the message got to them, but he was just this one quiet man who never spoke very much. He never had many sentences.
Elizabeth Gaskell used to hang around Monton Street.
Did she?
She did the opening of...
well, Moorside was posh then,
the
wasn't
opening
it?
of one of the novels starts in Green Hayes, in Green Hayes, where the Green Hayes Centre is. I wanted to talk about dead quick about someone else. I just felt as if I had to commemorate some people who are new in libraries, and we're probably not old enough to remember. When I first started going in Central Libraries, a really old woman on the counter, and she was quite frightening. She was called Mary, and she was 358 when I started working there. And I'm sorry, I love the weirdos who no one likes to talk to. So me and Mary became buds, proper buds. She was solid. I went to her house once and she was a proper order. You know, her house was just full of shit and books and stuff she'd nicked. No, not she'd nicked. But Mary sat on reception and did everyone's registration. And she was beautiful, and she'd worked there since she was 15. So she'd worked there her life. It was her life. I had a load of respect for Mary. And one night, there was a band messing about downstairs. And I went, Mary, what's... Because she always had the information, Mary. She knew everything that was going on, obviously. So I said, Mary, what's going on? She goes, oh, there's a popular music band playing tonight. So I said, great, who's on? And she goes, they're called World Party. I was a massive fan of World Party. And I was like, sorry, Mary, what's the band called? Mary left libraries and disappeared into a world of no one knows, because no one ever contacted her, and I tried to keep contact for a bit. But Mary is a spirit of Central Library, and I bet she's floating around there now amidst those...
You're such a writer and poet,
821.914. Is that a classification for British poetry?
Is it?
I think it is. I'm going to read a poem.
Go on.
It's all about kids for me. It really is. It's about doing everything we can as grown-ups.
Read the poem, Mike.
I'm halfway through it, Shirley. to make the world a bit better for them, because on the whole they struggle, and they ask for help, but they don't always get it. For the next 10 seconds, I want you to remember you were 15 and begging for help, and there was no one there. If only... I'm just going to leave it. If only we went to the library more. I hold my hand up high for help. It never comes. A fear that breeds so deep within this broken sleep and living dream, where no one sees or hears my call, my pleas for peace. I slowly bleed. I battle through each passing day that goes so slow, so slow. I never seem to know which way to go or where to turn. My life upturned from bird, absurd and blurred. I slur my words in hope and hold my hands up high for help. It never comes amidst angry screams like slapping hands or punching fists. My back, my sides, my ribs, they never stop. They never seem to miss. Each tearing strips inside. I'm torn, I'm ripped, and I am continually hit. I need to feel warm rays of sun upon my face. This cold pouring rain won't wash away these stains, this bruise inside. From where I cannot hide, I'll cry tonight. From head to toe I'll die inside, behind these eyes that weep. A sadness weeps, a slow release from deep. This pool too full to hold, this weight, this depth, this breath I breathe. A mass that drains and soaks the cheek, quick wipe with cuff or sleeve. No one must see. No one must see my sad release. My anger bursts, erupts inside with punching fists and kicking feet. I beat myself for being weak. I bash my head upon the floor, the wall, the door. I cannot live like this no more. This hate, this pain, too much. The loss, the fight, the mind entwined within itself, the past, the tales. I hold my hand up high for help. It never comes. No answers to these questions asked and asked. A truth that never lasts but comes and goes and hangs and hums within a sky that holds my thoughts, my dreams, my words, my tears, my slow release. A wave upon a beach that washes up on the leaf and leaves the things it does not need so it can breathe, so it can grow and crash and last. I hold my hand up high for help. It never comes, so I must retreat. I must cast away my simple dreams and swim within this stormy sea alone. No hand to hold, no cheek to kiss, no arms around my shoulders. So this skin, my blood, these bones that no one wants or no one knows or shows the slightest thought. This soul, my heart, I hold, I feel it beat so fast. It cannot last. I am so cold. I need to feel the warmth, the peace, the warmth, the sleep, the endless sea where no one sees or hears or calls my name. I plead for peace. You should clap there, really, you know.
Thank you both. And you're right, we've missed clapping. You deserve the clap, and we missed the clapping for both of you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I love the way that you agreed and disagreed on so many things.
We do it all the time.
Shirley, man.
And I think it's a hallmark of libraries. But the one thing you both agreed on, which I'd absolutely echo, is about the staff and the people. And if you only see one thing during Festival of Libraries in addition to this, I would recommend having a look on the Manchester City of Literature website, and we've got films with 6 or 7 library staff talking about why they work in a library, and they're really something, really potent. So we're going to turn it over to you now, if you've got questions for Michael Shirley. We've got quite a unique moment here, intimate space, and just a few people. So
what I really like is
now.
when I'm in school, Shirley, what I really like is when I'm in school, a teacher beforehand will have give the kids interesting questions to ask the poet who's visiting. Yeah. I don't know whether that's actually gone on here or not, or whether fundamentally you and I have answered every single question that could possibly be asked. What's your ex?
I don't know.
Let's see.
All right.
The challenge. We've got a question at the back.
There you go.
So Shirley, I'm interested in what you said about that first moment when someone first enters a library and the difference that can make. I'm just wondering what you think makes the difference in that situation. What makes people feel welcome and what doesn't?
Well, you know what? There's 2 faces you can have in life, and there's this one, and then there's this one.
Get easy, just smile.
Do you know, you can go into a library and people are having a bad day. You know, we all are experiencing stuff in our own personal lives all the time, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. But I think that when you are in a public arena, if you're at a theatre, wherever it is, it should be that you are open. You know, part of your training should be around being open to receive people coming in whatever condition they come in, you know, and there's a training that needs to take place for all staff around whoever's coming in.
But when I started in libraries, they were terrible with kids.
Absolutely, and some libraries are still terrible with kids. They see children as a menace. I've never seen young people or any human being as a menace. For me, it's allowing people to come in and be themselves and being just having a moment to be accommodating and just trying to help someone get to where they want to go, whether or not it's to the loo and they've only come into the place to go to the toilet, or whether or not it's to pick out a beautiful book and learn about, I don't know, Emily Dickinson or Amira Baraka for me, because I love the Black Canon, and that's what I teach, because it's so missing from schools, it's so missing from
like the Irish canon in lots of ways.
Exactly. Very,
side by side.
Yeah. But we've got, Seamus Heaney and famous people like that really get mentioned. And then, somebody will say, who's Amira Baraka? And he was like the most profound poet that came from Newark. And I had the privilege to meet him, and he was one of the first beat poets. And he may never have been seen if a library and a theatre hadn't come together to put that man on, and so
libraries have that local connection.
Yeah,
whereby
they're in communities. Yeah. They are in communities, but it is about how you train your staff at front of desk. I've had young people go into a place that I'm a partner with, and the first thing they did was say, we can smell weed on this kid. He's black. Don't smoke weed. One of the most brightest, talented young poets is called Isaiah Hull in Manchester. And the first thing they did was, accuse him of smelling of a substance that he was not smoking or using. And it's those preconceptions, and those are the things that we need to eliminate, when people are accessing our arts and our culture. Just accept people to come in and allow them to be themselves in whatever condition they're in, and not actually prejudge. How dare you say to a young person, this is what you smell of? Straight away, you've made them alien to the building. And I say to you, I work with a lot of young people, and I go, your parents own every public space in this city. Go occupy it. And if they tell you you've got, in some places you've got to buy the food, I went, go to Tesco's, buy your butty, buy your sandwich, eat it in there, and be rebellious while you're doing it, and have a conversation with your friends.
This was it about me and you, and we didn't get to it in our conversation, but this was it. We were two souls who were outside the library world, who were plopped in the library world.
Yeah, we got called mavericks, do you know what I mean?
With quite powerful positions, so it was sort of like an opportunity for us to stamp our thing. But anyway, I'm going.
So I think it's about being open and welcoming.
Smile, man.
Would my young people come in this space, they would absolutely love it. But you see them come up and they've got short trousers on, they've got, quivs, and they've got coloured hair, and they look amazing. But immediately people, some young people have just come into the library, oh God. There are some people that are still like that. And that's what we need to dispel in every arts and culture corner of this city. Occupy. We're going to occupy your new building, John.
We've got a question at the front, Vicky.
It's weird listening to you, because I didn't go to a library until I was in my mid-20s. Parents never went. And I was working in a factory. And a library was a way of getting out of the factory. And so I started going to night school. And I went to Salford Uni. And I remember sneaking into Central Library. And all my mates didn't go there, and thinking, oh, they're not going to throw me out. I'm allowed to come here and read.
Yeah.
And it's weird, because now I'm a teacher. And I earn enough that I'm a member of this place. You actually pay to be a member of a library, and I come here because it's kind of quiet, and it feels like, oh, I've made it. And yet, I've never, ever took a book off the shelf in here. I come here, and I go in that back room, and I open my laptop up, and all my reading is off the internet. And I'm just wondering what you think about you alluded to it, the internet was starting when you were in there in the late 90s, and the internet's everywhere. These young people, because I work with young people, and I'm thinking, all they consume nowadays is off the internet. And in a way, Central Library's worked because it's got drum machines and it's got whatever, but all the kids in there aren't reading the books, they're all reading the laptops.
No, they're still taking books out.
I think they might, yeah. But can you when you go in there in the big main room, they're all there on the computers.
So that's when we kick in. That's when librarians.
How do you get that there in the internet world to still be relevant, as in the tactile feeling of books and the opening of a book, when kids these days they're digital natives, I think they'll call them. They say they've never known anything other than opening a laptop and reading it off the phone. How do you make the internet world still connect with libraries as places where books live? God, that took a long way to get to that question.
No, it's a good point. It's a really important point, because it was something we looked at really closely as well, studying and as librarians. And it's about the individuals in lots of ways, and the opportunity of that individual, the person who's in that library, to see that kid and to go over to that kid and to say, I've seen this, or conversations whereby, I don't know if you know, but it's a really good poem about, it's on the 4th floor. I've just phoned Christine, she's got it ready for you. And what you're doing with that kid is you're saying, I'm arsed. I'm bothered about you. So much so that I've just phoned up there for Christine on the 4th floor to get me that Seamus Heaney poem to have it ready when you arrive.
Exactly.
So then that kid feels valued, because in lots of ways they're not valued, are they? They're seen as pain in the arse in most cases. We make our young people feel valued by doing things like that. And the thing is, it's not hard. It's dead easy. It's simple. It just takes simple acts of kindness and smiles.
And the intersection between the two things, having books that are on the computer and making sure that books are gifted to people is really important. My grandson is a little bit like myself. I'm dyslexic. I struggled with books, but I loved them. At Christmas I bought him Khalil Gibran, The Prophet.
Brilliant.
And he was like, and he's only just starting to read, really, he did the Harry Potter thing and then kind of threw them away. But I gave him this book and he was like, oh, Grandma, have you got more of this? This is just so interesting. But is that the right age for Khalil Gibran? Because I think that when you're sort of like 16 to about 24 as a guy, you should really read it. It's quite, you feel like you're getting, knowledge, and it's quite profound. But I think it's still about gifting things and, taking this out of their hand, and just going, and just dash that down for a little while. Guess what? Grandma, have a book, and reading with people and having reading circles. I've got a group of women that I used to read with quite a lot. Didn't do any writing as a writer, and they were called Sister Talk. No, that was the band that was in Sister Girl, Sister Girl, and all we did was just anything that came out, we would just share what we were reading, and all the time I'll put online what I'm reading next. Just making sure that actually, it's so beautiful, a book. I use audio books because of my dyslexia as well. So there's all of that, where you can listen and you're still absorbing a book at the same time. I think it's about how we gift books to people, whether or not it's audio, whether or not it's tactile and you can touch it, or whether or not it's on the internet with Mike's dial-up from, I love the idea of a phone being put in and it costing 40 quid to speak to someone. Yeah.
Well, going back to the kids on the internet as well, dead quick. The kids on the internet do eventually go to books because they just want an alternative to what they want. I've seen this. I've seen it. And also, a lot of kids on the internet, especially the edgy kids or the kids on the periphery, they sack social media. They're not interested in social media, and they want books. They want that alternative type. And I think it's tapping into subcultures in lots of ways, but just making sure that everyone realises that when you walk in this room, you're going to be looked after. There's someone in this room who cares about you. Unfortunately, within my experience of working in libraries, I had a room whereby groups of kids used to come into. When them kids walked in that room, they knew it was a different world. And that's what libraries do. They create different worlds in a world which isn't welcoming to young people, which isn't kind, and which isn't caring, and which isn't smiling. In most cases, it's moaning. What libraries do is they create safety. They create safety for young people who daily visit trauma. And they create this space that says, don't matter anymore. Someone hasn't turned off the mobile phone. It just says they are safe. That's what I love about libraries more than anything else.
Well, at that point, just know that, creating different worlds, we're going to stop it there. Shirley, you mentioned about a gift before, a gift of reading, a gift of books. I'd just like to thank both of you for the gift of this evening, for sharing so much. As you mentioned before, you call yourselves Mavericks. We knew that this would be an honest and unpredictable conversation, and I've really enjoyed being part of it. I'm sure everybody else has. So, Mike, Garry, Shirley, May, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Give them a round of applause.